Welcome to Couch Time with Hank. It's Hank Green on his couch. God, it's Saturday night. My wife is going out to hang out with friends. I'm home with the baby. And so, you know what that means? Let's talk about freedom of speech, everybody. Because Alex Jones is, you know Alex Jones. He's awful. He's lies about conspiracies. I don't want to get into explaining Alex Jones to people who don't know about him. Let's just accept that he's bad. Alex Jones is kicked off Facebook for 30 days. He's been kicked off YouTube, I think, entirely. And Ted Cruz, who's a senator in the U.S. from Texas, says something to the effect of that this is a violation of freedom of speech. That the First Amendment, he says. In the U.S., we have something called the First Amendment. It guarantees people the right to say whatever they want as long as it doesn't hurt someone. Like you can't yell fire in a crowded theater if there's no fire, because then people could get hurt in that situation. So there are some speeches that are okay and some speeches that are not okay, but for the most part, we in America, we can say what we want. You can publish what you want. You can stand on the corner of a street and yell about whatever. You can publish whatever. If you are a company and you want to publish a book about whatever, you can do that. And that's why we have a lot of people who say nasty things in this country, and yet, organizations like the ACLU will protect their right to say them. But, I mean, the difference here, and everyone has already outlined this, but the difference is that Facebook isn't the government. It's a private company. And in the same way that if my publisher isn't required to publish my book, Facebook isn't required to publish Alex Jones's videos or to host them, or because I think that in general we don't understand the legal relationship between content creators and platforms on the internet. I, as a person who's posting a YouTube video right now, I'm not. This isn't like free speech here. YouTube is licensing my video. I have created content, and there is a legal relationship between me and YouTube. They are the licensee. I am the licensor. The license is explicit. You can go read it, and there are a number of provisions of that license. And if they don't want to have my video, then they don't have to have my video. And if I don't want to put my video on their platform, I don't have to put my video on their platform. There is no other legal relationship here. When I upload the video, I license my video to YouTube. It's implicit in the upload process. And this gets a little complicated when people, of course, like I earn my living from this platform. And it seems like if YouTube said your channel's canceled, which, to be clear, they would be completely within their legal rights to do. They could say, Hank, no more channel, you're done, and they wouldn't have to give me a reason for that, and I would lose, like if say they did that Crash Course SciShow and Vlogbrothers, we would lose, our business, and we'd have to lay off all of our employees, and it would be a super bummer. We probably would figure out something, and some of the people would stay, maybe. But most of them, no. Which is great that I don't think that there's any way that would happen. But they would be within their rights to do it. The question becomes, is there a point at which a platform like YouTube or Facebook becomes so powerful that you could make the case that they are the only way to reach a certain group of people? I don't think that you could make that case, but it seems like that's the case you'd have to make if you were going to tell those platforms. They don't want to be called publishers, but they are, because they're licensing our content and putting it on their site and figuring out how to monetize it, and etc. If those publishers didn't, in the same way that like Dear Abby columns are licensed, in the same way that like if I wrote a freelance article, it would be licensed to the publication I wrote it on or for. the yeah, that like they are a publisher. They really don't want you to call them that, but they are a publisher. But if there is only one newspaper in a market, if there's only one way to get news, then there are some monopoly considerations there. And this isn't just about economic monopolies, though I think that's generally how it's regulated by the FTC, I think. It's about a cultural monopoly. It's about, if there is one company that is able to control what a huge number of people see and learn and know about, that starts to become the kind of thing where it's like, I see what Ted Cruz is saying here. He's saying that it's a little troubling that a company like Facebook, if they did suddenly have a strong political bias towards some outcome or or some political party, etc., that like what's preventing them from using that power? If they have a bias toward like if Facebook wants everyone to be happier or more unhappy, like what's preventing them from doing that? Just the market, right? Like if Facebook starts to make you unhappy, theoretically we'll stop using Facebook. If Facebook stops giving you the information that you want, if you start to feel like there isn't enough good information on Facebook, then you'll start to go to other places to get information. And so the market is the thing that's making that decision. But it is a little bit frightening, especially when you don't necessarily know that these things are happening. And it is interesting that the sort of party of the free market that's supposed to believe in the power of markets to make these decisions. So like if Alex Jones doesn't have access to his audience on Facebook, he can continue uploading his videos to his own website, of course, because freedom of speech. Like he can publish his own newsletters and mail them to people. He can email them to people. Like all that stuff's still available to him. But if we're saying that Facebook has so much control that it's a violation, or that it's never going to be a violation of the First Amendment. Like that's explicitly not how the Constitution has been interpreted by the Supreme Court. But if you can make the argument that like something is being violated, or Facebook has too much power and is like, if there's a legal reason to have this conversation, it's about like a failure of the free market. It's not about a violation of the First Amendment. And so then that problem would have to be solved through regulation, or it would have to be solved through a antitrust split where you take Facebook and you carve it into pieces and you don't let them be the same company anymore. And that is an interesting thought to me. I absolutely think that these platforms eventually, if not already, are going to be too powerful and will need that. Either that, or they will become, in a sense, the government of their social space. And maybe that's already happening. This is so strange to me to think this about like Facebook and Twitter, that because to me, and YouTube and many other places, because to me, I am a kind of citizen of these places. I exist there. I have a lot of social relationships in those spaces. I also have a business in those spaces. And so in many ways, like I am a citizen of YouTube, but I certainly don't get a vote, like I don't get to, I have actually a fair amount of connection with the people who work at YouTube, which is really nice, but certainly most people don't. And I have nothing on Twitter or Facebook. I don't have those connections. The question becomes like, are those companies kind of the governments, and are of those communities? We could definitely call them communities, but you could even call them, the non-physical cities, basically. Like it's easy to imagine them that way. Are we already in a world, like did it happen, that we are now in a world where we occupy social spaces, we occupy places where we live that are entirely market based, entirely, corporate spaces. Like, it happened. I don't think that we noticed it happening, but it happened. And and as more of life takes place in those spaces, I don't know. I'm not saying that there is a legitimate argument to be made that Alex Jones should have his Facebook page. I don't think that there is. But I do think that there is a legitimate argument to be made that these aren't just private companies because they control a social space that we exist in. And so in some ways, it's not like no, it doesn't, like, there is no First Amendment that applies to Facebook, but there is kind of a understanding, and I'm not saying that this is like written down, and I'm not even saying that like it's known. I just think that like this is kind of where Ted Cruz is coming from. In his mind, he feels like, in his gut, and maybe he knows this absolutely, like in his own mind, he knows that this isn't the case, but he knows that in like the people who are going to read it, in like his constituents' guts, they have this feeling that the First Amendment should apply to Facebook. Not, and it's very different from a normal publishing company, like a newspaper. Like, of course, you like wouldn't say like, oh well, the New York Times is refusing to publish Alex Jones's articles, so thus they're violating the First Amendment. Like, that doesn't make any sense in your brain. But what does make sense in your brain is, like, YouTube decided to take down the channel. Like, this hasn't happened, but if YouTube decided to take down a channel of someone who is criticizing YouTube, you would feel like, wait, that feels like a violation. That feels like a violation. Or if YouTube suddenly like took down, and this actually has happened, where YouTube took down a lot of gun fun channels that were like, here's how to do things with guns that aren't legal. And people interpreted that as a political act, and it felt like a violation. It felt like a violation of something. What did it feel like a violation of? It felt like a violation of freedom of speech. Why? Because we don't imagine these platforms as businesses. We don't imagine these platforms as publishers. We don't imagine these platforms as anything except the place where we live. And so we imagine that, like, in our guts, not in our heads, these places are the places we live, and thus we think that the rules of government should be applied to them. That's fascinating. That's like what an, of course, 100%, like, not going to be on board with, what Ted Cruz has to say. But it did make me think a lot about this. And what I'm coming to realize, is that we are going to be living in these spaces that are run by corporations, that are not run by governments, that we have no say in. And so you have to figure out how to live in that community and how to have a voice in that community and how to affect the leadership of that community, the government, if you will, but really, of course, it's the C-level management. And we're figuring that out. And I think that, the way that we've done that on YouTube, because YouTubers have a lot of voice, and also they have a fair amount of power, not through like traditional, voting stuff, but through like market-based, threats of, we'll go and start our own platform, or, be like, say nasty, mean things to YouTube, and lots of people will be mean to YouTube, and it will be bad for YouTube's public brand image, which is currently very good. And so YouTube knows that there's economic value in the positivity around their brand, and we can erode that if YouTube does things we don't like. and also by making human arguments to human beings who work at the company. Like it's a kind of activism for a space that doesn't exist democratically. It exists in this like very specific form of autocracy that is like American capitalist corporate structure. And so like that, yeah, that's where we're at. And in a way, Ted Cruz, being a person who has a lot of power in government, but also a lot of power socially, because people listen to what he says, his constituents, his fans, people who, he's a leader in the conservative movement. People will listen to what he has to say and exert negative pressure on Facebook for this reason, because it feels as if it is a violation of the freedom of speech. Not because it is, but because it feels as if it is, because we now live in communities that are not democratic, and we have to figure out how to exert influence on a non-democratically run community, on a community that is, a corporate autocracy, and you know controlled by its shareholders, its owners, its executives. And that's, I don't know, I hadn't thought of it that way.